Welcome back to the news at 10. I wonder what Nigerian undergrads think about this, but the Minister of State for Education, Professor Anthony Onwuka, is proposing an additional 1 year of studies for courses in Nigerian universities. Professor Onwuka explained his suggestion at a meeting with vice-chancellors from federal universities in Abuja. He says the initiative will help undergraduates gain experience in their chosen field of career just before their National Youth Service.
Hands-on experience for students. The reschooling concept, that is, you finish your university degree and then maybe add 1 more year as a finishing school project. I don't know how you're going to sell, how you're going to buy here. That has come as a result of the failure of our sewage system in the universities. We try to address the relationship between the universities, the industry, and the graduates, how they can fit in. And we introduce the sewage projects in the universities. But the sewage project is not working. It's not providing that bridge between schooling and industry. Because most industries are willing to accept most of the students in the sewage project. And when they don't, and there's a provision there for the students to have that experience before they graduate, they kind of do some usual thing in Nigeria, some mago thing, and produce some documentation that shows they have had some touch with industry. That is not functioning. And the industry will continue to clamor that what the universities are producing may not necessarily meet up the expectations of industry. And therefore, the employers of labor refuse to employ our students. And that problem is consistently on the tables of the vice chancellors in these universities.
Well, staying with education, the University of Lagos appears set to score another first with the plan to set up a modular refinery and also procure a mining license. This is according to the Vice-Chancellor of the institution, Professor Oluwatoyin Ogundipe, during his investiture as the 12th Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos. Also at the event, the Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Akinwumi Ambode, who delivered the convocation lecture, blamed lack of trust as a factor hampering the growth of the nation. Our correspondent Chris Helms reports.
This procession is the start of the investiture of the 12th Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lagos, Professor Oluwatoyin Ogundipe, and the 2016-2017 convocation lecture. It's in pursuant to the provisions of the Institution Act of 1967 that a person be appointed to that position after fulfillment of all requirements. The Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Council, Wali Babalakin SAN, after constituting the gathering for investiture, gives his opening speech.
If there is a choice between free education at all levels and good education at all levels, I have chosen the latter, and I believe the audience will support me in choosing the latter.
With the citation and administration of oath concluded, Professor Ogundipe is handed the instrument of appointment. In his response, the Vice-Chancellor rails out some of the plans laid out by the university.
Prominent among our goals is setting up a modular refinery, as well as obtaining a mining license for the university. When in place, the refinery and mining site will serve as laboratories for our students in the faculties of engineering, science, and other related faculties.
Attention soon shifts to the lecture, where the chairman, Professor Anya O. Anya, decries the state of the nation's education sector.
We need to face the issue of the needs of our universities as a matter of national emergency. We cannot be asking that they be competitive without providing what it takes to be competitive.
Then the state governor mounts the podium to deliver the lecture, Inclusion, Path to a New Nation. He calls for a shift of responsibilities in governance.
We must implement the federal system as it was intended to be. Heretofore, too much power has resided in the national government. This has been to the detriment of the authority and efficiency of both states and local government. This has caused a governance vacuum of sorts. The federal government is burdened with tasks beyond the reach of its best competencies.
With the investiture and lecture done, the door to other activities marking the 2016-2017 convocation of the institution is flung open. Chris Ilems, Channels Television News.
There appear to be what some would say a war of words over the nation's refineries. The House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee investigating the state of the nation's 4 refineries has expressed disappointment at the NNPC and the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria, for failing to appear before it with the required documents for a second time in 24 hours. The committee accuses both the NNPC and the CBN of intentionally withholding relevant data that will help improve the nation's refineries. Our correspondent Terry Kumi has more.
It's the second day of the public hearing organized by the House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee on the state of the nation's 4 refineries. The NNPC and the CBN have returned after being turned back on the first day for failing to appear with relevant documents. But the House is dissatisfied with the representatives sent by the CBN.
We are not the right person to come here and answer a question, so that the CBN will now send the right person with full information to come and face this committee.
Then it's the turn of the NNPC, and things suddenly get hot as a member of the committee and the chief operating officer of the NNPC engage in a war of words.
Sir, can we please stick to what we're here to talk about? No, sir, because you cannot ask me questions about the upstream.
If I ask you a question, you do very well to answer. Although we'll be here for a long time. It's my job to ask you the question,
and I'm answering.
Yes, all right. So you answer, and don't be cheeky about it.
I'm not being cheeky.
Don't fluff around with me. You are under my authority. You answer to me, I do not answer to you. Wait, this is the parliament. I was elected to ask you questions. It's not your job to ask me questions or to be cheeky about it.
I'm not being cheeky.
Right, if you don't want to answer the question, you leave that position.
I have answered.
All right, so let's carry on in a very...
Do not shout at me,
Don't you
do not shout at me.
Who are you?
Calm is eventually restored, but there are still pertinent questions for the NNPC to answer.
Are you aware that Eni is a multinational or international oil company that is being subjected to prosecution by the public prosecutor of Milan?
The turnaround maintenance is supposed to be taking place to 2 years, and it's now on the average of 10 years or even more. The reason you gave is that you don't have money to do the turnaround, but you have money to pay for subsidy.
Eni, or through NAOC, is a major investor in the upstream in Nigeria. They have a number of assets, and Eni is also a major downstream player across the globe. I also want to confirm for the record that NNPC does not pay subsidy. We actually benefit from subsidy ourselves. We don't pay subsidy, sir.
The committee is once again dissatisfied with the documents presented by the NNPC.
Then we are also expecting to have an audited account of NNPC, and also the budget for the same period of time, 5 years.
Participants at this public hearing argue that proper turnaround maintenance has not been carried out on the nation's 4 refineries, with a production capacity of 445,000 barrels per day. They also believe that this can be improved upon by either privatizing the refineries or carrying out proper turnaround maintenance. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Let's now join Kayode Okikolu, who has today's business stories.
You first. First Bank.
Thank you, Millicent, and welcome to Business News. The International Monetary Fund has forecast a 3.4% expansion for the sub-Saharan African region's economy this year, up from 2.8% in 2017. according to its latest regional economic outlook for the region launched simultaneously in Ghana and Gabon today. The global lender expects the growth to be boosted by stronger global economic growth, higher commodity prices, and improved market access. The IMF, however, warns that slow growth in Nigeria and South Africa, two largest economies in Africa, is weighing heavily on prospects for overall growth. In the meantime, the IMF suggests that Africa needs to be more self-reliant to meet the demand of heavy investment to build infrastructure and social development. The African Development Bank today launched Africa Investment Forum in Johannesburg, South Africa, and the promise is no political speeches, but transactions all the way. The launch is a forerunner to the first ever Africa Investment Forum to be hosted from November the 7th to the 9th in Johannesburg. The president of the bank, Dr. Akinomi Adesina, and host Premier David Makura explained that the platform targets the private sector.
For investment, finance, transparent transactions, and a genuine African marketplace for closing deals to accelerate the economic development of Africa. Africa's infrastructure financing needs are estimated to be between 130 and 170 billion US dollars per year. However, total commitments came to just about $63 billion in 2016. As it has been for decades, national governments are still the main providers of infrastructure finance in Africa. This represents a financing gap of approximately 67 to 107 billion US dollars in just infrastructure alone. While the African Development Bank and many other multilateral partners and donors are making significant contributions, this still does not close that gap. But Africa can, and Africa must do so. There are extraordinary deals to be had in Africa. The Africa Investment Forum is in perfect position to identify and to shape these deals for investors, fund managers, and others managing substantial assets. Together, let's offer the world a collective deal of the century for investment and development of Africa.
And following the recent reports by the BBC on codeine addiction, the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, has shut 3 pharmaceutical firms in Lagos and Ilorin, Kwara State. Meanwhile, embattled pharmaceutical giant Emzor Nigeria Limited has cleared the air on its involvement in the abuse of the prescription drugs codeine. Dismayed at the report, Emzor says that it has launched thorough investigations into the documentary and has suspended the production of Emzolin pending a regulatory review. Emzor explains that its average daily production level is below 0.5% of the estimated number of codeine reportedly consumed in the 2 northern states mentioned in the report. The company denies the 2 representatives featured in the report, adding that the sales personnel was an entry-level staff and has since been suspended. And elsewhere, the consumer goods sector recorded the largest loss as bearish sentiment continues to dominate proceedings at the local equities market. For more details of today's trading session, let's join Teniola Shobowale.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Lackluster performance persists for a second trading day at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. At the market's main index ends Tuesday session almost flat down by 0.04%. Traders attribute the further decline to profit taken by investors, particularly on the shares from the consumer goods, the oil and gas, and the insurance sector. However, on the activity chart, the overall volume of shares traded was significant at 563.61 million units, while the shares of FCMB is the major contributor with over 50% of the total units of shares. Out 24 gainers, QTix emerged as the top gainer, up by nearly 9%, while the shares of Forte Oil recorded the highest price loss among 25 decliners. And that's the Stock Market Report. I'm Teniola Shobowale.
Thank you, Teniola. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal takes its toll on major world stock markets on Tuesday. Let's see the closing numbers. And that's business news. I am Kayode Okikiolu. It's now back to Millicent.
You first. First Bank.
Thanks, Kayode. Still ahead on the news at 10, it's action-packed day 2 at the Lagos preliminaries. The Scores advance to the quarterfinals of season 10 of the Channel's International Kids Cup. That's in sports news. Please stay with us.